Hello, welcome back. Fred in the shed too. Fred up in the shack. It's a little bit croaky. Still trying to shift this cold that I've had for getting on for 2 weeks now. So hence I got my glass of juice, and if my voice starts to give out, you'll understand why. So on this video, I wanted to carry on with the last chatty video that I did, because I really enjoyed the comments that came back from that video, and it's so nice to talk about the past, and it's so kind of nostalgic. It was such a long time ago when CB very first sort of exploded. It launched itself into the UK in the end of, well, very late 1981, but for me, really not the summer of 1982. When I said before that I was just 15 years old, I was still at school, just finishing my GCSEs at school, so I had quite a lot of spare time. Supposed to be revising, but I suppose I did do a bit of that. But we had quite a lot of spare time, you know, and as I said in the last video, the radio just exploded. It absolutely took off, especially with the young people, because here was sort of something that we had for ourselves. You know, it felt like it was our radio, if you like. And I think certain times of the day, certainly in the afternoon, you know, into the early evening, I think it was our time of the radio, because we just dominated it, absolutely sort of completely spammed out the 40 channels, if you like. And it was quite rebellious as well, you know. I was thinking back actually when I was reading the comments, and yeah, it was a very sort of tough time in the early 80s. We had a very right-wing kind of government here. In the UK, there was high unemployment. When I was to leave school a year later in 83, it was an absolute nightmare trying to get a job. So there was kind of a feeling of militancy, a kind of feeling of rebellion, if you like, that we sort of the people had something. And I think there's a bit of truth in that, because I have read before on the internet that the government were quite scared at the time that suddenly the people could communicate without their sort of control, because obviously there was no, you know, mobile phones or anything like that, and people could congregate and have mass protests and mass meetings that they could organise over CB radio. And I do believe that the government at the time were quite worried about that. But that's another subject for another video, maybe. Now on this one, I just want to talk about my personal experience, and it appears some of you as well had the same sort of things going on in your local area on the sort of CB. And two things I want to talk about on this video. Just, you know, just a general chat. First one is the all-nighters, which a couple of people had remembered from the comments when we used to do the all-nighters on the CB, and then that will lead into the Lovebird channels. And there was a funny story at the end of that, if you get to the end. But yeah, the Lovebird channels. I don't know if that went on around your area. It might have just been something, you know, around my area. But so firstly, the all-nighters. Now, you know, what happened here was midway through the week, bearing in mind we was all kids, very few of us were working, so we was at school, so we couldn't do much sort of, you know, in a weekday, because we were just kids. But it used to get to sort of midway through the week, and again this was sort of in the spring and the summer of 82, when it was at a real high, and someone would sort of suggest, oh, you know, let's all do an all-nighter on Saturday night on, say, channel 30, and it was like a party. It would sort of get round, you know, and you'd go on, and they'd sort of say, yeah, Fred, we're doing an all-nighter on Saturday, you're going to be on, mate, and I'd be, oh yeah. But to me it was a problem, because obviously I lived at home with mum and dad, and they didn't want to be woken up by the radio. Me being on the radio, I couldn't sit there and talk on the radio all night. So, you know, for me it was a question. I had to literally sort of I had a pair of earphones that I had with a Sony Walkman. Yeah, do you remember the Sony Walkman? But the problem with that is it was mono. I only had one channel. So I had they were quite comfortable, but I'd be kind of literally under the sort of covers. No duvets in those days, but under the covers I'd have the earphones on. I'd have one channel of all this sort of static, and I'd swap it around. I'd actually change it over from ear to ear, because it would get really uncomfortable and you'd start getting ear pain in one ear with all of the static going on. when I think of it now, the things we used to do. So I'd be sort of hunched up under my bed, if you like, with the microphone, and sort of as it went later on into the evening. Luckily, my parents didn't go to bed too early, but as we sort of, we got past midnight, I would have to be speaking very quiet on the microphone, and there'd be, didn't get a copy on you, speak up, and I'd have to sort of try and balance it. And I think once and twice, his dad come in, get off that bloody CB this time of the night, bloody keeping me awake, I'll tear that aerial down. And you have to, I'm so sorry, Dad, I have to unplug it, and then just like go back to listening and cover up the little teeny light on the CB display, so my dad didn't come bursting back in. But I think it only happened a couple of times. I was pretty careful. Let me just get a bit of juice. I'll get quite enthusiastic, I'll get carried away and my voice will go. So yeah, the all-nighters. Now, what kind of fuelled the all-nighters, and to be honest, once they were off radio, it kind of died down, was the girls. Because the girls really got into the social side of CB. And yeah, they would sort of have these sort of kind of sleepovers, if you like. I think that's, they sort of called them sleepovers. So they would have all their sort of girlfriends come round, maybe sort of 3 or 4. And of course, they'd play music and stuff, I imagine. And yeah, they'd be on the CB. That was sort of part of their evening's entertainment. And it was the girls that really kept going longer than the guys. And I think that's true in life anyway. Women tend to sort of have a lot more sort of stamina than men in general sort of terms. So yeah, the girls would all have you go to channel 30 or something, and you'd have like all of these sort of girls on the radio. You'd have at least one sort of sleepover going on. They'd be passing the mic around, and it was so attractive for kind of 15, 16-year-old lads, to be talking to these sort of girls. It reminded me at the time very much like that sort of scene we had from Grease, because Grease had sort of been in the cinema, I don't know, around that time, maybe a couple of years before, and that sort of stuck in my mind, that Sandra Dee scene, where all the girls are kind of like sitting around eating pizza and in their sort of pyjamas. And yeah, it was the sort of girls that kind of carried it on, if you like, and it was quite good, just to sit there and listen to it, and it was really sort of quite funny. And you have guys sort of come on and try and chat to the girls, and the girls would just run rings around us all, really. And I think personally, I used to get through. I'd probably stop talking at about 1 o'clock in the morning or sort of something, and then I'd just sit there and sort of listen. And I never got past 3 o'clock. Come 3 o'clock, and I was just gone. Even the sound of it in coming in one ear, but it would sort of send you to sleep. So I never stayed on right the way sort of through the night. I remember sort of coming to about 5:30 in the morning with a real stiff neck and a pain in my cheek where I'd slept on my headphones, and then quickly turning on the CB, and it was like it had all finished. I was never there at the ends. But what happened in one of these sort of sleepovers was that there was another younger sort of girl. She was like 15. I'm not going to use real names on this, just in case no one's ever going to be watching these videos, but I don't think it's fair. But we're calling Nicolau, and yeah, we got chatting. And we got sort of chatting, and we used to sort of do our own kind of thing, perhaps in the evenings. We had a certain channel, I think it was channel 35. Now that was weird. Do you know what? Back in the day, there's no sense to this, but we always thought that the higher the channel that you picked, the further you would get out. The better you would get out on the higher channels, and you'd have the less range on the low channels. And it's complete rubbish. I don't know why we thought that, but we always did. But anyway, it turned out that Nicola she only lived about half a mile away from me, which meant I could get her very, very strong, and people couldn't sort of key over her and things like that. And another thing was that, do you remember on the back, I haven't got one on the bench here, but on the back of the original UK sort of 2781 CBs, they had a switch which reduced the power down from 4 watts to 0.4 of a watt, just basically just under half a watt. I think that was a legal compliance. I think if you increased the height of your antenna above 1.5 metres, I think you had to use half a watt. No one ever did, of course. But we could switch our radios down to this half-watt setting because we was only half a mile away from each other, and we could sort of, copy each other perfectly fine. And she used to come on, to about 8, half 9 at night. We would sort of have our little kind of cosy chats, if you like, on our half power. And we kind of got left alone because not a lot of people realised, we were on channel. Occasionally someone would come in and we'd have to sort of go to another channel because they wouldn't realise we was on there. But what the funny part of this was that she used to use the radio in her dad's car. Her dad had, I think it was a Mark III Cortina, and he used to park his car at the end of her driveway, and she used to sort of sneak out in the evenings, wrap herself up in a big duffel coat. I think that was her dad's as well, and she'd be sort of sitting in her car, almost like freezing, if you like, on the radio, and everything was sort of fine until that we decided, me and her, that we were going to do an all-nighter. She was going to sneak out when her parents went to bed and sort of creep into the back of her dad's car with a CB, and she did. And we was on, and we were chatting about all sorts of stuff, all perfectly innocent at that age, but we were chatting about all sorts of stuff right through the night. I don't know, I think we got to about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think she got so cold that in the end she had to call it a night. But because we'd been on for about 7 or 8 hours, even on the low power, the next day when her dad got up and he went to get in his car to go down the road to buy his local newspaper, his car wouldn't start. She had completely flattened the battery, and he had the real hump, and basically she had to own up to the fact that she'd been on the CB late at night, and that finished that, unfortunately. We never did get another late nighter with Nicolau. But these sort of late night things did occur on sort of CB, and you had a certain group of sort of friends, if you like. We had the sort of younger set, we used to come on when I'm coming from school. We were sort of anything from 14 to probably 17, and then you had the older sort of guys and girls that they drove cars, and then once you was mobile, you kind of you would chat to some of the base, like the kids, the base stations, but they kind of had their own group, and they would go off and sort of go out to pubs and things like that. And that was quite interesting because quite often, obviously, I used to go around my mate's house, or my mate's houses, that they didn't really have, they weren't into CB. I had one mate that was into CB. Well, that was kind of good for me because I had sort of two sets of friends going on, and that was quite useful. But but I'd like to listen in the evening, about 7:30. You could hear on sort of channel all of these older guys and girls. They'd all get together, and you sort of, one of them would get in a car and it'd be, "Oh, Dave, yeah, I'm just leaving now, mate. I'll meet you, and pick you up at the end of the road." And Dave would be in his car. "Yeah, okay, I'll go and get, I don't know, Sarah. I'll go and get Susie. Yeah, okay, right, and we'll meet you." And you could hear them going all around the town, just sort of chatting away on their CBs. There'd be sort of 2 or 3 cars, and they're all going for their sort of night out. And then sort of eventually they would drift out of my range, and they'd just sort of disappear. But if I was around, later on in the evening, I'd go out with my mates, and there was nothing for us to do. I'm walking around on push bikes, and once the local fish and chip shop closed, and that was normally about 9 o'clock in those days, the town was absolutely deserted. So I was pretty much home early most of the time. I can't remember. Mum might have put a curfew on me, 10 o'clock, something like that. But there was nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do. So I'd be sort of back home, and then I'd just be flicking around a sort of CB. And then you'd hear all of these guys and they start coming back, once the pubs are sort of closed about 11 o'clock, you'd suddenly hear them coming into range, and they'd be having a right old time, on the CB. Language was a little bit blue, of course, as you'd expect for teenagers, but they'd all be chatting about their sort of, night out, and I was so jealous. I really, really couldn't wait to kind of get a car and sort of get out there, and sort of join this group of people. I felt so kind of like isolated, stuck indoors. I couldn't wait to grow up. And now it's the other way around. I want to be young again, but I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to grow up. So you'd hear these kind of guys, hacking or driving around town and all the rest of it. And then what would happen was the ones that had sort of girlfriends, they would sort of go around and drop their girlfriends off. And then when they dropped their girlfriends off, the girlfriends used to like to know that they got home safe, So the girlfriends would sort of go inside, and then they would go on the radio, and they would sort of talk to them while the guys were sort of, driving home. And I think the girls sort of, it gave them a bit of security to know that the guys were going home and they weren't sort of going around another girl's house or anything. They could sort of keep an eye on them, if you like, in the days for, mobile phones and stuff. So you'd hear, the groups would break up and then they would disappear, and they'd sort of pair off into twos, and you could then sort of hear the guys and the girls chatting as they were sort of driving home, talking about the evening they had and sort of, how funny it was. And I was ever so sort of jealous. And I used to sit at home and listen to this, you see. And, it kind of, it's a bit kind of voyeurism, is that right? It's a bit kind of odd now that I think back. But at the time, I was 15, 16, and that's what I did. And what would happen sometimes is that they would go down to the lower channels, and these become known as the lovebird channels, because these were the boys and the girls, the girlfriends and boyfriends, just talking to their sort of partners, mainly as they sort of drove home. Now, I never admitted at the time to anyone else on CB that I used to tune into these Lovebird channels, because I thought it was a little bit of a wrong thing to do. It was kind of a slightly, it's almost a bit pervy, isn't it? It was sort of slightly a secret sort of thing to do, listening to these sort of, these sort of Lovebirds, if you like. But there was one particular couple that I used to tune into. They were just that little bit more saucy, if you like. And it also helped that I knew I sort of had met the girl at an eyeball. I didn't know her personally. I'm going to call her Susie, because I'd gone to an eyeball in the summer. And bearing in mind, if you weren't around at the time, these eyeballs didn't really last that long. I mean, we had the spring and summer of 1982. I think there was about half a dozen eyeballs in my local town, and they were brilliant at first. And very, very quickly, they kind of dwindled down. People got a bit bored. And then in the end, me and my mate on CB, and I might talk about him on another video because he was a bit of a boy, but we used to have to get on a bus and go to the next town where it was a bit bigger and there was a bit more going on. So these eyeballs didn't sort of last long. But when I did go to one of these eyeballs, I caught sight of this girl. She was probably 18 or something. I was 15, so she was completely unobtainable, and she reminded me of a cross between Susie Quattro. She was very short, about 5 foot, and Sally James. And at the time, I had a massive crush on Sally James, who was on with Chris Tarrant on Tiswas. I thought she was just kind of the auntie that you really, really wanted to have, if you like. So I'll be honest about it. I had a real crush on this girl, who I'm going to call Susie. And and I actually spoke to her at the eyeball. She was so nice, but mostly because she wore these incredibly tight jeans. I was 15, come on. But I mean, she had a great arse. I mean, she really did. So, I was kind of secretly in lust with this girl. And until we found out that she was going out with this guy named Steve. And Steve was a really sort of tall, lanky fellow. And at the time, it seemed so uncool, because I think he must have been a tradesman. He was a plumber or a builder, and he drove a van, for Christ's sake. I think it was an old Sherpa or something. He drove a van, and he had this really tasty little girlfriend. And all the other sort of guys and the girls, all the other guys had their sort of Escort Mark 1s and Escort Mark 2s, and one of them had, I think, an XR2 Mark 1. And that was all quite sort of trendy sort of cars. And this guy, Steve, had a van, but he still managed to get hold of this little Susie. So Susie and Steve, now it was quite interesting, because my sort of town was here, if you like. Steve lived out of town in a little village sort of here, and then Susie lived on the other side of town, just on the outskirts of a larger town. So I couldn't really receive Steve or Susie brilliantly, but I could kind of make them out, if you like. So what would happen was Steve would then sort of drop Susie off, And there was always down on, I think, channel 1 or 2 or 3, and I would sort of tune down, and and Susie had this really husky voice. I mean, I don't know if she smoked or maybe that was it, but she had this very calming, husky voice, a bit like Claire Grogan, but not Scottish, She was lovely. So I used to listen to Steve and Sue. He would drop her off. She had a very good antenna. She had a very nice, strong home-based antenna, and that used to get out pretty well. Steve was always mobile in his van, but because he had a van and I think he had a K40 whip, he got out pretty well as well. So you'd hear them two say their sort of good nights to their mates over the air, and then a little while later you'd hear Susie come across on her home base chatting to Steve on his way home. And and it kind of become a regular thing, I just sort of it does sound so pervy now, but I'd sort of be listening there just with me sort of my earphone on, if you like, just listening to the Lovebirds channels. I never told anyone that I did it, because I was a little bit kind of not ashamed, but it wasn't something I wanted to spread around, not what I was doing. Anyway, this particular night, it was a hot sort of, if you like, sort of summer's night, and Steve had dropped Susie off, and then sort of Susie had sort of come back on. Oh, hi Steve, oh, I had a really nice night, really sort of all that. Anyway, Steve was sort of driving sort of home from Susie's, which meant he had to sort of, drive past my sort of QTH, if you like. And he was clearly sort of quite worked up that night, and they were a little bit saucy, this couple, and he would sort of say to sort of Susie things like, oh, you look lovely tonight, Susie. And she'd say, oh, thanks. And he would sort of say, oh, what knickers were you wearing? And she'd come back and say, oh, it was too hot, I wasn't wearing any tonight. Oh, dear. You can imagine it being 15, 16, listening to this. So then he's driving home this particular night, and he would sort of say, oh, you know, are you in bed then? And she said, oh yeah, I just got into bed. Oh, it's really hot tonight. And he sort of said to her, you know, what are you wearing in bed? And she said, oh, that my little baby doll, which was kind of like a little nightie, you know. So this is all going on in your head, you know. And he was like, oh, you look really lovely in that. And she was like, yeah, just keep your eyes on the road, Steve. You know, don't want you to have an accident and all this. And she then let on that her parents apparently had gone away. And her nan was staying. She goes, oh yeah, I've got me nan. And he was like, oh, I didn't know your nan was there. Oh yeah, parents gone away. And he's going, well, it'll be okay, you know, nan's taken her tablets. She'll be asleep till the morning. So Steve, by this stage, had gone. Obviously, I knew he'd gone past my QTH because of my signal drop down. So Steve's like, oh well, you know, well, I could come back, Susie. You know, you could let me in if your nan's not going to wake up. And she was like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. Oh, it sounds so bad now. But anyway, then this went on. And in the end, Steve was trying to sort of talk her into this sort of thing, you know. And in the end, Steve said, well, I'm going to turn round. She was like, no, we can't. And I'm sitting on the side thinking, oh, yeah, you can. So Steve did a U-turn, and I watched my signal meter get stronger and then get weaker away. So I knew he was going back to her. And it ends up that Steve parks out, or just round the corner or somewhere from my house. And he said, I'm just round the corner, Susie. And Susie's like, no, Steve, no, I can't let you in. He goes, oh, come let me in just for 10 or 15 minutes. Oh, come on, Susie, I'm really... He was really getting worked up. And she was like, no, I can't. Oh, come on, Susie, come on. And this went on for about 5 or 10 minutes as he was trying to sort of convince her that the risk was worthwhile. It was really something to listen to. And anyway, by this time, it was probably about 1:45 in the morning. I'd forgotten sort of track of time. I was completely engrossed in this will they or won't they kind of thing, you know. And then this was the funniest part. Suddenly, over the sort of channel come this very deep baritone voice. and he said, for Christ's sake, Steve, will you just get in there and give her one and then we can all go to sleep? And it was dead silence on the channel. No one spoke. And I was like quite shocked as well. And then suddenly another voice came up and said, is that you, Dave? And it was like, Dave? Yeah, it's Dave. Is that you, Rog? Yeah, it's Rog. Bloody hell, you're on here as well, you pervert. Who else is on here? Come on, be honest. And then another voice said, yeah, I'm on here. Who's that? Oh, Martin. Oh, hello, Martin. Anyone else? Come on, you might as well come out of the woodwork. Another voice was, yeah, I'm on here. Who's that? Phil. Oh, what's your Phil? And then another voice, yeah, Malcolm, I'm on here as well. And there was all these guys. And it was complete silence from Steve and Susie. And all of these guys were kind of on channel, and then they started, yeah, come on, Steve, just get in there, son, come on, do the business, then we can all go to sleep. Dead silence, not a word from Steve. I'm sure they were absolutely mortified. And I found it so funny that I just thought it was me listening to this, like, you know, pretty much every night when it was on. I thought it was me. And of course, no. Everyone else was tuning into the same thing. We're all a bunch of perverts. We really were. But yeah, that was funny. And after that, as you can guess, they never basically did that again, unfortunately. And I think after that, I think some of these guys were part of their group as well. I think they were going home and sort of tuning into it. And after that, so a lot of lovebirds, that they had their CBs sort of adjusted. They had a sort of was it an E-prong board or something put inside? It was basically an extra crystal. And it put them onto the mid-block, or it put them onto the sort of like a 10k shift, if you like. So you could sort of sometimes hear them, but you couldn't hear what they were saying. But that was the Lovebird channels. And yeah, again, something that was short-lived, you know, it was only really that summer, and then it all sort of broke up. But it sticks in my mind. I did find it was sort of so funny. The All-Nighters and the Lovebird channels. So there you go. I just thought I'd just chat on. I probably bored the arse off you. I do apologise. I thought I'd just chat on about that. I've got some other stories as well. My mate, Simon, who was I used to go to the Eyeballs with. Basically, yeah, we had, I don't know if I'll tell you this one, but we had the eyeball from hell. We had the most disastrous blind date eyeball with these girls. It was absolutely terrible. I was mortified at the time, but maybe I'll save that one for sort of later on. But anyway, there you go, just a little chat. If you have stuck with this, thank you. And you're just as sad as me, thank you very much. Stay safe. And I don't know when I'm putting this video up, but take care. And of course, yeah, I'll catch you all on the next one. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.